my degree is in math, and I was a math major. I was going to be a mathematician, but at some point in college, I joined this improv group, and I actually observed them for a soc paper. Like, I couldn't have come at it from a nerdier way, and.
Welcome to the How I Met Your Mother podcast for the episode entitled The Stinson Missle Crisis. This is the 4th episode of the 7th season and the 140th episode of the series. My name is Alec Lev, and we are coming to you from the offices of How I Met Your Mother here at 20th Century Fox Studios in Los Angeles, California. You can follow us on Twitter at HIMYM Podcast, Himyum Podcast, where we will announce upcoming guests and where you can submit your questions and comments. The voice you heard at the top of the show was writer Tammy Sager, who also appears as the birthing instructor in this episode. This week I spoke with Tammy, writer Kourtney Kang, and series co-creator and executive producer Craig Thomas. Craig, Kourtney, Tammy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's dive right into this episode. We've got 2 stories. Robin talking to a therapist, played by Cal Penn, about an assault, but really about her feelings for Barney. Meanwhile, Ted is trying to figure out how he's going to fit into Marshall and Lily's pregnancy. How did these stories develop?
I feel like the first thing was Kourtney's actual doctor, your OBGYN, wasn't it? Wasn't that the initial little spark? I mean, at least for the Marshall-Ted side of things, it was kind of like we were riffing on the fact that Kourtney had the most chill, lax, laissez-faire OBGYN, who's literally on basically the same name, right? We changed the name slightly. Is this where we get sued that I'm saying this? Is this horrible that I'm saying this? But it was based on her, right?
Yeah.
That was the spark of that one.
Yeah, I had a doctor who anything you asked her, she was like, oh, you can just have a little bit. Everything was like very, very calm. And then when I actually went into labor, that calm woman went away, and she was this completely intense, like, drill sergeant of a woman. And so...
What was she yelling at you?
She was going, "Push, Kourtney, push." That's what the whole, like... And I was like, what happened to a little bit? So, yeah, that's...
Had you had any glimpse of that side of her prior to the go moment?
No, I had said to her, like, I was like, when I go into labor, like, I want to make sure, like, I want an epidural, like, I want drugs. And she literally said to me, like, oh, when you go into labor, you will have drugs, you will be relaxed, you will feel beautiful. A few pushes and baby will come. Then, like, when I actually went into labor, it was, like, not that at all.
Oh,
like, she was just, like, intense and, like...
Turned into Full Metal Jacket.
Was like really, really intense and was just, like, yelling, "Push!" And yeah, so we were laughing about it, I think, in the room, and then we had sort of talked about Lily Marshall pregnancy story and how does Ted fit into that, and so.
But the funny thing is, we weren't going to show that other side of her until way later in the season. But then we discovered that the end of that story, the Act 3 part of that story, it felt like we needed one other really high energy joke. But right when they're kind of wrapping up the sweet ending of the story, it felt like it was a little too sha-la-la-la sweet. Yeah. And we decided it'd be really funny if you just freeze frame and flash forward to this woman just screaming like a mad woman, which is exactly from Kourtney's life.
Yeah.
So we weren't going to do that in this story.
No.
It was just going to be the cool, chill version. But then I was really glad that we added that in, because now we have somewhere to write to for what she does.
Yeah.
We actually asked Carter about that last time, of all the times that you go to, but we'll get to that later, kids. I said, do you keep track of these? Do you have these? And his answer was, yes, we're really excited to get to them. We have to sort of resist the urge to answer questions right away. In this one, you have, that's a crazy story, kids. I'll get to that.
Yeah.
That was with Marshall not being there in the screaming. How much do you know of what's going to happen when we come back to that scene?
We know exactly what's going to happen in that scene. I don't want to say exactly when that episode is because I don't want to give anything away, but I guess it's pretty obvious it's toward the end of the season. But yeah, we have an entire storyline planned out for that, 20, almost 20 episodes in the future of exactly how that plays out. And that's why we had Lily say in that flash forward, "Where the hell is Marshall?" So we're going to get to that and tell you where the hell Marshall is in that moment. Not based on Kourtney and her husband, Zach, who made himself available for the birth.
For the birth.
Which was very nice of him.
And then on the other side of the story, the assault and Robin and the therapist, where did all that come from?
Yeah, and that I think the impetus for that, and I want to come back to the birth because I want to talk about Tammy Sager killing it at the table read as the birth class. We'll get to the birth class coach and winning the role out from under lots of throngs of actors that could have lined up. In fact, maybe they already did. Were there auditions already for that, or did we give? So people came in and then we just said no, it's Tammy.
Yeah, she beat. I had watched tons and tons of auditions, and then went to the table read and Tammy.
And then we're like, no, let's give it to one of our writers. She was better.
She was amazing.
We'll get to that. The Barney story of this, I think the impetus for that wasn't something from real life, but just the observation that by having Barney Stinson in a relationship at the beginning of this season, he's chasing Nora, then he's with Nora. You don't get Barney to be Barney. And we had an enormous concern about that. We're like, we can certainly do fun stories about Barney trying to figure out how to go after Nora and how to be with Nora. But just, this is episode 4, and we had done a little bit of that. We wanted to show the audience, like, he's still your Barney. He's still your beloved Barney. Don't worry, he's not going to stop being that way. And the only way we could do that is by him cleaning up the messes and long-term plays that he had going on. We didn't want him cheating on Nora in episode 4 or anything. But it was a great way just to see him be him in flashback. And we didn't want to do the playbook all over again. That's the other thing. We always talked about, is there a sequel to the playbook? Is there a way we can go back to it? We've tried to break an episode called Playbook 2 about 100 times, like trying to make it our like Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors. Like we do an episode called Playbook once a year for 6 years. But we never kind of cracked that. So this in a way, this was kind of our Playbook 2, like with the subheading long-term plays and a different approach where we're just seeing things that have already happened. Is that accurate?
It was
That's pretty
also
much
based, not to name a writer, but it was based on one of the writers who, before he started seeing his long-term girlfriend, they kissed and then she moved away for a few months, and he had a bunch of plays that were sort of going to
He had some other missiles in the air.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It sort of started from the
plan
idea
out.
of like when you start dating someone. I feel like what makes the best episodes of How I Met Your Mother come from somebody in the room talking about a real thing that happened to them, and it was sort of that idea of like you can be casually dating, and then when it becomes serious with one person, what do you have to do in order to close other things down, stop, talking to other girls or this and that. And so it sort of started from the place of tying up your loose ends before you can really commit. And if you're Barney Stinson, then tying up your loose ends is a little bit more elaborate and entailed. And so, but it sort of came from that real place, like Tammy was saying.
I was actually going to ask you about the idea of turning Barney around, which just seems like that's where this seems to be going. I don't know anything, but that's a bold move and doesn't happen that often to that kind of character. Mm-hmm. Sam Malone, last like 6 episodes, he went to sex rehab, and Charlie Sheen, they were not going to turn him around at any point. Before the season started, did you think, wait a second, if we're giving him a long-term girlfriend, we're going to have to deal with... Did you know that this would be a challenge?
We were worried about it a little bit. I mean, we thought, we earned the idea of Barney taking a second look at his life after reconnecting with his dad, and which we did at the end of season 6, and him sort of reconsidering his own life felt natural and earned, and we had 6 years getting there. But you don't want to sacrifice what's fun about Barney. So that this was really our response to that fear. And basically after that, the episode stopped being good this season. Barney's just really boring. So if you watch any episodes, watch the first 4, then just shut it off. No, there's plenty of fireworks and intrigue to come. I mean, Barney Stinson is still Barney Stinson, and his entry into a serious relationship with Nora is certainly going to be fraught with some turbulence, and we're getting tons of fun stuff about it. I don't want to give anything away, but the entirety of November Sweeps is really about that, and I think it's going to be just funny and emotional and intense, and I think it's really going to make fans happy, even if for a few episodes they're going, where's this all going? How long is Barney going to be dating this girl? All will be answered in I think a very, very fun and sort of soap operatic way.
So we do have a television star now in our midst, Tammy Sager, writer for the show, and now superstar. How did the role of Paula, come to you.
Well, we fill in for parts. The writers will fill in at table reads for parts, and that's really fun to do. And when I first read Kourtney's script, I actually saw that part, and I was like, "Oh, I want to read that at the table read," because it was a really funny part. And actually, initially, I wasn't assigned to do it, and I totally manipulated.
You lobbied for the part.
I totally did. Not at all.
Did you have, like, your agent call Kourtney?
But I also knew that it was for a woman in her 50s and 60s, because that was even something that was discussed. Kourtney was like, "Oh, the women they're bringing in are too young." So I definitely didn't think I would actually get to do it. It's fun to read it at the table.
Are you implying you're not in your 50s or 60s?
I'm solidly my 70s. I'm way too old for it. So I didn't have that agenda. I just thought it was a funny part, and it was just.
And I think you were pitching in the room in a certain voice, too, as her. We're right? Because we were sitting there in the writer's room pitching on that for a few weeks. And I seem to recall, like, Tammy having a really good take on sort of how to pitch lines for her and for this character, Paula. And then we do have a phenomenon sometimes where one of the writers will read a part, will then cast it with a real actor. And you'll be kind of bummed out because the writer did it better.
Yeah.
So this is us trying to not have that happen, because Tammy really was hilarious at the table read, getting really big laughs. Tammy is, to be fair, cheating because she's a professional actress and had 5 years in Second City in Chicago, so it's not, anyway. But, yeah, I think it would have been a bummer not to have. We just would have been comparing it to Tammy if it was someone else.
And it's crazy, too, because I took a birthing class, and this woman in my head was, like, very specific. There was this woman who had, like, 10 kids, and she birthed them all naturally. And, like, it was a very specific idea I had in my head. And so everybody they were bringing in, I was like, she's not right. Like, these are too young, they're too this. And then Tammy came in and is nothing like the woman who taught the birthing class, but was so funny that it was like, this is it. It was nothing like what I envisioned, and it was 100 times better and so much funnier. And Tammy was and on set, the crew she just killed. Everybody was just cracking up, and she just was in character, and she didn't wear shoes. That was like her choice. And then when she came down on set, it was really cute. We were talking to her for a little bit, and we were like, oh, like, we have 5 minutes. I'm going to go upstairs. Like, you want to come upstairs? And then she sort of quietly said, like, I think I might just walk around the space a little bit and get familiar with it.
It was method.
Yeah, Tammy was like, I was like, you go do your thing. But she owned that space. That was her birthing class.
And Tammy, this is interesting, like, Tammy remained in that character for the next 2 weeks.
I actually went to.
It was weird.
Yeah,
this is the first time I've heard you talk in your normal voice.
What was really neat was seeing, like, this is an incredibly kind work environment. Everybody is. It really does feel like a family, and it was neat seeing. Oh, it's like that in makeup too, and hair and makeup and wardrobe, and like, oh, it's really nice to see that kindness and respect for people. And the people in makeup had no idea that I write for the show. They, just thought I was a day player, and I was treated so beautifully. Like, it was, I don't know.
That's nice.
It was really cool to see that the show runs that way.
Are we talking to Paula or Tammy right now? The line has blurred. That was way sweeter than things that Tammy says.
It's a very beautiful place. Feels like Paula, not Tammy.
And what was it like once you were there? Once you were there on set, what was it like being directed by Pam, working with the actors?
Again, everybody was super duper nice. It was really nerve-wracking because you practice in your home, and then you're like with 12 extras, and Jason and Josh are sitting there, and we did the run-through, and all my instincts were wrong. Like, my back was to the camera, and I was like, I just don't want to upset Kourtney. And Joe is there. Like, we just walked through, and as I was walking, I was like, this is the wrong way to walk. This is the wrong way to walk. Your back is to the camera. What are you doing? But I also, I knew how Pam works, just, being on the set, and I was like, I'm going to be told what to do. And sure enough, she very gently led me through and was like, okay, when you say your line, maybe look towards the camera. Yeah, it was really fun. And then it was going back up into the room, like, all the glamour was washed off, and then you're back in the room for 7 hours.
We do have a question from Twitter. Lee A. Bryan says, what do you do to get your mind in gear before you approach a project? I guess, Kourtney, more specifically, you're sitting in front of your computer, you're actually ready to write. Any ritual? You know, you just knocking out. I gotta get this thing done. I don't have that much time. Do you have your coffee? How does it work?
I have a little Apple computer that's like the tiniest laptop they make, because I feel like it's more intimate if you can be like closer to the computer. So that's like my own weird little thing. And we actually had a little hiatus, and I wrote the first draft of this while I was on hiatus, and so I like to write outside if I can, like fresh air and not be inside. So I have this little like outside patio that I sit and write on. But my daughter, I have a 3-year-old daughter, she was home, and my dear best friend is also her nanny, and so he was home watching her, and I remember when I first sat down, I finally got everything, I'm like all set. They were planting roses, and he was singing Old Man River, like really, really loud. Yes. And I remember being like, as he was singing Old Man River, just having that feeling of like, how do scripts ever get written? Like, I can't imagine this ever getting done. Like, you know, but I feel like every writer has that feeling, like when you first start, it's so daunting of like, you know, there's all the things you want to do, and, you know, we break the stories here, and so when you go off to write, you know exactly what you're going to do, and, you know, we have jokes and, you know, things like that, but just sort of like compiling it all. So my ritual, I guess, is a little computer, a moment of panic, and then just diving in.
Craig, last time...
My answer to that question would be get drunk.
That's your answer to everything.
Touche.
So we asked Carter about this last time, and I guess like two criminals being interrogated separately, I'll ask you. The beginning of last season, we
It was
talked...
Carter.
At the beginning of last season, we talked about your vision for season 6, a romantic New York, and you had a specific feel, you had specific music in your head. Mm-hmm. How did what wound up actually happening match with what you had hoped it would be?
I feel like it matched. I feel ultimately the season began and ended with a George Harrison song. It was a season about out with the old and in with the new to some extent. There was buildings falling down. There was someone's father dying, and there was a baby, you know, beginning to grow in a belly. So it was life and death that season, and yeah, I feel really proud of it.
Last question. How do you know that you're funny? I know it's a strange question, but I think that when people... I remember Jon Stewart was once asked in an interview, you know, you're interviewing these people, and you just have to... In the middle of talking about this heavy politics, you know, you just gotta throw in these jokes. Is that hard to be funny? He's like, no, that's easy. I'm funny. What's hard is keeping up with the meatier stuff. At some point in time, you are comedy writers. The notion that you are professionally funny has to just sort of be a given. But I think that's very outside most people's experiences. Is there a moment where you just, in your life, where you just make the leap, I'm funny enough to do this, to be professionally funny?
Tough question.
Well, writers are also lacking in confidence.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like
I remember specifically from me, because I switched from math. My degree's in math, and I was a math major. I was going to be a mathematician, but at some point in college, I joined this improv group, and I actually observed them for a Soch paper. Like, I couldn't have come at it from a nerdier way. And then I dated a guy in the group, and I became best friends with the girl in the group, and it was doing bits with these people who I knew were funny, and it was having them say that I was funny, that I was like, some switch in my brain turned from like, oh, I'm not just a math, because I don't think I ever thought of myself as funny before. Like this very specific point when I was 20.
I think lots of people are funny. I know a lot of really funny people. So to me, the answer to that question would be, can you also write it down and it's still funny? And I think the Jon Stewart answer is really good too, because the hardest part is getting the story and the structure and the emotion. If you have that right, and it all makes sense, and it comes from character and it comes from life in some way, I feel like adding the funny part isn't that hard. That's how I feel about writing scripts. I find the funny less daunting in a way, because if you're kind of adding jokes and adorning something that works and is interesting and engaging and true, it seems okay. I mean, you also have to be funny, and you have to know how to write a joke and have it be right for each of these actors and each of these characters. It's hard, and it's a mystery how it happens, but I do feel like the test is, can you write it down? I know lots of funny motherfuckers out there, but I don't think they could sit down and write a script and have it work out and be any good. So yeah, can you write it down? That would be my answer.
All right, thank you all very much.
Cool.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this week's podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Himium Podcast, where we will announce upcoming guests and where you can submit your thoughts and questions. Remember to watch How I Met Your Mother CBS Monday nights and every day in syndication. Check your local listings. Become a friend of the show on Facebook and check out cbs.com to learn more about the show and watch exclusive clips. Follow the show on Twitter at Himium_CBS. Sneak into the writer's room at Himium_writers. Get tweets straight out of the production office at Himium Prod. And commune with Barney at Bros Life. Our sound engineer is Jesse Olsen Milkman. My name is Alec Lev, and thanks for listening.